This is the story of a boy who was very sensitive to lights and sounds. So he built secret hiding places where nothing could get in. The boy didn't like looking people in the eye. It made him feel uncomfortable. One day, he found out he had something called autism. His family got him help, and slowly, he learned how to live with it better.
Early intervention can make a lifetime of difference. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org.
Your son wants to get a cat, but you're allergic. Do you A, prepare yourself, B, make the best of it,
C squared equals
25.
Good job.
or C, find a loophole? When it comes to parenting, there are no perfect answers, but that's okay, because you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Teens in foster care will love you just the same.
The following program was provided by an independent producer, solely responsible for its content. The views, information, or opinions expressed during this program series are solely those of the host and guests appearing on the program and do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Brainstorm, bringing great minds and ideas together, exploring a wide variety of opportunities, achieving academic excellence, using the latest technology, government's impact, preparing for 21st century careers, parenting and health issues, topics shaping tomorrow. Brainstorm with Lisa Williver, bringing great minds and ideas together.
Hi, welcome to Brainstorm. I'm Lisa Williver, and today we're talking about teaching for understanding. Before we begin, let's learn a little bit more about our topic. Before we ever stepped foot into a school, someone probably introduced us to the alphabet and counted with us every day. Learning is something we are wired to do, and curiosity motivates us to keep learning. But do we really understand the things we are learning? In today's world, finding information takes merely seconds, but are we providing students with the tools to truly understand it? Joining me today, I have two very, very important guests here because you are going to be the experts on a topic I know very little about. So we have Steve Beatty, the Secretary-Treasurer of the New Jersey Education Association, and Dr. Christine Miles. And you are the, I want to get this right, Professional Development and Instructional Issues Associate Director at the New Jersey Education Association. Okay, so before we begin, why don't you each tell me a little bit about your background in education? Do you want to start, Steve?
Sure. Well, I'm a practitioner. I'm a high school social studies teacher for 24 years in Bridgewater, Raritan, and that's my experience. Obviously going through a variety of learning procedures and curriculum design with comes along with lesson planning. And so my experience comes from being in the classroom.
That's excellent. And how about you, Christine?
I have been a high school English teacher and then also a supervisor of English language arts and English language learner programs, so working a lot with curriculum. I have done consulting work with Authentic Education, focusing on understanding by design, which is teaching for understanding. I've been an assistant principal, and now I'm also at the New Jersey Education Association.
That's wonderful. Now, the topic for the show, Teaching for Understanding, I have to admit, I've been out of the classroom for a while, so when I first heard it, it was like, teaching for understanding, isn't that what we always do? Mm-hmm. I didn't understand that this was a framework, that this was a whole different way of looking at how we as educators teach. And I think when I first started reading all the research, I was really intrigued because this wasn't learner-focused. This seemed to be teacher-focused in how we do our job and how we present material and we create things. So can you give me a simple, just kind of background definition of teaching for understanding?
Mm-hmm. So it's basically all of the design work that teachers do when they're not with students, so that when they are with their students in the classroom, it makes it more likely that they'll hit those higher levels of ability, higher levels of thinking, deeper understanding with students, so that students are able to really get beyond the Googleable answers and start to think critically about the work, start to unpack ideas and see connections, and really develop the complexity within their thinking.
And I like how you just said the Google aspect of it, because I think a lot of kids now feel that they don't have to know something because in a second they could know something, you know, just the gathering of facts. How do you feel about that? Do you see that happening?
Definitely. I mean, in the 24 years that I was in the classroom, we did projects all the time in research, and so early on in my career in the early and later 90s, we went to the library, and we still had the card catalog, and kids would find books, and we knew 973 was the history. We'd go there and start with that. And of course, over the period of the later years, it became search something, ask Siri, or I can just, you know, I was excited one day in class when the students were actually looking. I thought one student pulled a book out and then used her phone to take pictures of the pages to email it to herself for later on.
Yeah.
So I think that.
And we were getting dimes and nickels for
Right,
the copy
exactly.
machine, right?
And so it's become that, you know, the information is readily available, and it always takes, you know, what is legitimate, what sources are you going to have to discriminate in terms of what you're getting. So I really do see some pitfalls that go along with that type of searchable fact.
Sourcing is
Sourcing,
huge because that, you know, we went from, like you said, using the card catalog. When I grew up, you know, you had encyclopedias.
Right.
And there was such a limited amount of information for each topic because, you know, everything about B had to be in that one book.
Right.
So you didn't get pages and pages. And it wasn't current. You know, you usually didn't have a brand new encyclopedia every year. So now you have this glut of information, but it's really up to us as educators to teach the students how to discern between what's, you know, what's a great source and what's kind of questionable and what just sounds really like off the wall.
And part of that you could argue could be used for critical thinking, because if you do have some time to do that, you can look at and evaluate sources and where they're finding them on the internet and see which ones are coming from, you know, more reputable education formats versus, as sometimes I point out in class, some older gentleman living in his mom's basement who's just, you know, blogging about something.
Absolutely. I know when I was teaching, we would have the teacher's guide, and then we had the textbooks, and we had the workbooks, and sometimes an enrichment book if we were lucky. And everything was kind of plotted out, and you kind of, I like how you said in the research I did, you said, you know, you marched through the instruction, and, you know, you would, at this point, you hit a quiz, and at this point, you hit, you know, do the definitions, and it kind of went around that way, and at the end, you had your assessment, and then shortly after, you forgot everything that you had just learned. I mean, have you seen that in education?
Right, that's primarily the way that lesson planning goes and curriculum design when it's packaged from a big box textbook company. That's generally the way that it goes, and it doesn't treat the learner as an individual who has very specific strengths and areas of opportunity. So as educators, if we design curriculum in a way that's responsive to the needs of our students, we really can cater to where they are in a given moment, as opposed to, all right, we're on page 3, and tomorrow we're on page 4, and then we just trudge through a packaged curriculum.
Now, when you're teaching for understanding, does that mean you have the flexibility to address student needs? Because when I left teaching, they had just come into the portion of education where everybody had to be on the same page at the same time. And there was the pacing.
The pacing guide, right.
The pacing guide, which
pacing guide.
I never understood. And I had questioned. We had a liaison at our school right before I stopped teaching. And I said, we're all supposed to do this at 9 o'clock, every 4th grader. And I said, And I said, now what happens if my students don't get that concept? Tomorrow we're scheduled to do the next one. She said, no, you never go back. They'll catch up. And it was never my experience that when they didn't have a concept, they just magically caught up at some point. So I always thought the pacing was so unrealistic to learning. Not just educate, but to actual learning. So does this give you that flexibility?
It does. It gives you a lot of flexibility. So in a understanding focused curriculum, you have very high level goals that are specific. They identify where every student is aiming to get, or where the teacher is aiming to get every student. And then there are very critical lessons at different points throughout the unit, and the unit may be for a specified number of weeks or days. And there's a great number of days built in that are flexible. So when you have these pointed formative moments, so formative assessment, qualitative in that you're just kind of walking around the room and gathering some anecdotal data on students, or quantitative and you're really taking data from an assessment, and then you're refining your instruction. So you may have the ability to then pull back groups of students and work with those who are your most striving learners and need some additional support, at the same time, you have your highest performing group that's running with the more complex levels of understanding around a given topic.
It makes so much sense. I mean, it's just, now we have, at any given time in the field of education, we have teachers who are seasoned and who have been teaching from the old ways that we teach. So there's always professional development and things to continue to make people aware of what's out there. And, you know, how do you juggle this with having like new teachers coming out of college? Is this something that colleges are teaching the new teachers?
It is. So understanding by design is one of the primary methods of teaching for understanding, and it's a philosophy, a mindset, but it also has a structured approach to how to design curriculum, and that is taught in many pre-service programs for teachers. So they do have some understanding coming out of school, and pre-service educators have some understanding coming out of their programs as to what curriculum design looks like. But it can't stop there. It has to be something that is really valued in a district, and the teachers' voices and expertise and areas of interest are valued as well in that design process. So many times,
again, it makes so much
Definitely.
sense.
Right.
I mean, like,
You think it would be, yeah, does make sense.
We're like, yay.
But yet, oftentimes doesn't happen.
Right,
Yeah.
it doesn't happen. We've been under a very heavy culture of mistrust of educators in the state of New Jersey, and
I think all around the country.
And all around the country, right.
I think nationwide,
Accountability
it's
gone wrong.
Right.
Yeah, and blame the teacher. You know, when things happen, it's blame the teacher, and we forget how many different things affect education.
Right.
So, when you were just saying about the teacher's voice, is that something that you see as valuable?
Definitely.
For sure. I mean, there's nothing more valuable. I mean, as we talk about the process, it has to be continued, it has to be collaborative. As the people that are in the classroom that are trained to do a job, their input has to be valued. They're the ones who are getting the feedback, can use whatever indicators there are to inform their instruction, to design the curriculum. I remember some of the best summers where we had curriculum days where our department would get together in certain subject areas and really mine down deep into what was working, design thematic questions, look at it,
right,
collaborate,
together.
and then give ourselves a framework. So we might have had a pacing guide, of course, because, okay, so World War II, you had 3 weeks to get through it with these various objectives and questions, but every member that was doing that had the ability to do it in their way and inform their instruction with their students as the professional that they were, and they were valued for that. And that's a piece that is oftentimes missing, where we become more and more standardized to, okay, it's April 15th, every US 2 teacher should be doing this lesson, and that's, can't happen.
I recently had a discussion with couple of guests that were on the show, and we were talking about the IEPs and the 504s, and we really got down to the point where it's such an arbitrary way to measure students by age. Like every 5-year-old should know this at this time, and it's almost as arbitrary as height or what's your favorite color. Like everybody who likes blue, you need to know this at a certain point. So I think the flexibility here and taking the teachers' voices really makes this something that should be happening in classrooms. And I'm just so curious, what do you think has stopped it in the past? Why haven't teachers been given this autonomy to be able to be flexible and create things that they know their students need? I mean, is it corporate? Is it political? What is it that has kind of interfered in what should have been happening all along?
Getting back to the culture of distrust, textbook companies have very strict curriculum, scripted, because there's this sense that this is the one right way to do it for all students. And as practitioners, we know that that's just not the case. And when we follow a scripted curriculum, you can't take advantage of that beautiful question that Susie in the back just asked, that could be this wonderful teachable moment for the entire classroom.
But it's not in the script.
But it's not in the script, so we're just going to have to pause and not do that. So we have to be able to have this value for educator voice, this view that educators are professionals and we trust their judgment and their ability to tap into those moments in the classroom and really take advantage of the moments that we all remember in our classrooms, those shining moments where you're like, oh, can you remember back to 9th grade and Mr. Yeager's classroom, and we did this, and wasn't something we were supposed to do, but we all remember it, and it was a valuable lesson that we carry forward.
I'm actually going to ask you to think about a valuable moment you remember from school while we go to break. We will be right back with more Brainstorm in just a moment.
Oh, emojis! I thought the conversation just got dumber.
Ugh, internet trolls, just ignore them.
I like you just the way you are.
I believe in you!
She's a hugger. Give her a squeeze. Help up the hand. Ah, there you go. Thanks, mate.
You're killing it, Jane!
What to expect when you're expecting.
Like here.
A teenager.
Today, I'm going to show you how to team-proof your home. First step, hide the car keys. Preferably somewhere they would never look. Challenges will come up. Be ready for them. Hi, honey.
Ready for the... Mom, you don't use mannequins in the mannequin challenge.
You don't have to know it all to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
Well, Thomas, you've got prediabetes. But with more exercise and a change in diet, it can be reversed.
I've tried exercising. It just makes me hungry for bacon.
I love bacon, too. And who really likes to exercise?
Not me.
Me neither.
Nobody. So we're good?
What? Oh, you still have prediabetes. Big time.
Welcome back to Brainstorm. I'm sitting here with the very knowledgeable Steve Beatty and Dr. Christine Miles, and we're talking about teaching for understanding. And before the break, we were mentioning unscripted moments that happen in classrooms that are kind of the opposite of what a lot of textbook companies provide to teachers. They provide everything that's very scripted and regimented, and in my opinion, and I think the opinion of most third graders, way overstructured. So I know in a classroom, the learning process takes a lot of different routes. It doesn't just go point A to point B. And we've all been teachers, and we know that sometimes you need to embrace those moments, even if it's not in the script. Can you recall any moments in your teaching career that really stood out where you didn't stick to the script, but learning happened? How about you, Steve?
Definitely. I mean,
probably hundreds of them, right?
I mean, thinking the last few years I've been able to teach a class, it's an elective, seniors, called Global Studies, and it deals with contemporary issues. And one of the things that we do in the curriculum is we have a lot of project research kind of based things, and we culminate sort of the year in that students, after learning about all the issues that are kind of interdependent in the world, they design their own NGO, their own non-governmental organization, and they run a whole campaign. We have a fair that involves actually most of the student body. Wow. And then afterwards, we come back after this massive project that's kind of consumed 6 weeks, and we debrief and we talk about it. And I had kind of the usual debrief questions, but as with the class all got together and they went back into their groups, they started to engage each other in conversation about what they thought their project was about, whether it was clean water or human trafficking or climate change. Wow. And they were looking about how can we sort of take over and understand that through engaging each other in those important conversations, the larger kind of ways to solve some of these problems. And they just took it in a whole different direction, and they started writing letters to congressmen and senators.
And that's amazing.
Yeah.
And it wasn't in the script.
It wasn't in the script.
It wasn't in the script. Imagine that. How about you, Christine?
I'm going to share something that one of my colleagues down the hall did that I remember as a memorable experience, because all of the students then came down to my classroom and were talking about it, and had continued to talk about it for weeks to come. There was an issue, as there is in all schools, with kids not necessarily being very kind to one another and using language and words that could be considered offensive or taken out of context and just hurt feelings. And so the teacher down the hall, she had an apple, and she had all the kids circle up in the classroom, and she said, what I want you to do is to take this apple and say something really nice to it and give it a compliment. Talk about how shiny it is, whatever you want. And then after you do that, pass it to the person next to you. They did that throughout the whole class, and at the end, they then commented, what does this apple look like? Shiny. Some kids were buffing it as they were passing it along. They took a picture of it, later put that up on the classroom wall after it was reprinted. And then the second round was, okay, now say something not nice about it, and before you pass it, drop it from the height that you're holding it. And so each time a student would say something nasty about it, drop it, and it would get bruised and broken up, and by the time it came back around, it was really in bad shape. And they took a picture of it and they put it up on the wall. And the conversation that then ensued was, your words matter, and even though they're only words, they have a lasting impact upon the person that's receiving them. And whether they're receiving it directly or they're receiving it as the whisper down the lane, they still have a lasting impact. And it's not just a moment, it could be for weeks or years or a lifetime that these messages really, really hit us. And then the two apples pictures just stayed on the wall for the rest of the year, and then continued. It became part of the curriculum because it had such an impact, and it was a lesson that was always done, and it was woven into the literature when it was thematic, and the kids really were impacted by it.
You know what's impressive there? There's so many things to unpack in that one story. Is that a teacher and an apple. This wasn't an expensive lesson.
Right.
This was creative. And, I've always been, I don't know, I don't want to say insulted or offended, but when people say things about teachers and they don't understand what, we spend so much time in a classroom your whole life up until you hit, you're an adult, but you don't really have a great understanding of what's happening. Because when you're a student, you're at school. Teachers are at work. And there's a lot that goes into it. And people don't realize that teaching is an art. That it's not a science. There's nothing about it that can be replicated. What I do today with my class, I'm probably not gonna be able to do tomorrow. And everything changes because you have so many living little beings in that room, and you're constantly responding to things. So to structure anything to that point, it's like if you're a type A personality and you have this huge to-do list, and every day you keep putting more things on it, and you're frustrated at the end of the day because there's no way you could get all those things accomplished. There's not enough hours in the day. So, from that story, it's an example of when you let college-educated professionals, which teachers are, who are not just trained in knowledge, they're trained in something that's really special, which is how to impart that knowledge to a lot of different people who have different backgrounds and are experiencing different days, who's happy, who's not feeling well, who's grouchy. It really is a testament. Like one little apple story really captures a lot of what teaching is. And I love this idea of teaching for understanding because it's about learning. It's creating, lesson plans and meaningful lesson plans so that the kids can learn, which is kind of the whole point of this thing.
Authentic.
Yeah. How do you see with the teachers, is this something that they can do together? Even though you have your own class and it's flexible, can they work together in preparing?
That's how it should be, and I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more with what you said about that, because we are the experts. We are the ones who are trained. We're constantly learning. We're constantly knowing that we have to refine the game and understand what's going on, and whatever that means in the paradigm of a standardized education. But we are the ones who need to be making those decisions. We are the practitioners who are trained, as you said, and are experiencing it and dealing with so many things at once, making 2,000 decisions a day in the classroom, working with kids and modifying and then going back and reflecting. So to exclude the educator from the process, you ignore us at your own peril.
And I know so many teachers over the last, I would say, maybe 10 years, when this really started picking up speed with the overstructuring and the benchmarks and these, nonstop assessment. So many teachers that when I do my author visits at schools that I was accustomed to seeing every year, they fled. They've left the profession. And the irony is that they don't leave because they're tired of teaching. They don't leave because even though the money's lower than most professionals make, that's not the reason they left. And they certainly never left because they didn't enjoy being with the kids. It was everything but that. It was all the outside influences. It was the stress of being forced to do something that you know was actually hurting your students, and then trying to be creative enough to blunt the blow, so to speak, so that it doesn't hurt them as much. You know, I feel like this has so much potential to kind of bring the pendulum back, because I keep waiting for the pendulum to swing back to like kind of normal. This sounds like how we should be doing it. Is it something that's picking up steam nationwide? How's this working out?
So as a curriculum process, it has been in practice for probably a good 20 years now. But it's just a matter of districts adopting it with fidelity and not trying to fit the circle into the square. So really understanding that there's value to bringing teachers together and getting their voice involved in the curriculum design process, and that a textbook is not a curriculum, it's just a resource.
I hope what we're doing today is getting that message out there so that districts all over, you know, we hit a lot of cities on this show. I hope that people are listening and think, you know what, that makes sense. Why don't we play brainstorm right now? Because I have 8 ideas in the tradition of brainstorming.
All right.
So you know how we play this game. We will discuss an idea quickly, and if we think it's good, we'll keep it, and if not, you know where it goes.
Toss it.
Okay, idea number 1. Memorization is the most important key to learning.
Ooh, toss that one.
There you go.
I'm gonna slam that one there.
There you go. I like that. That's powerful. Idea 2, a meaningful education must focus on understanding.
Yes, and the development of understanding.
Definitely.
Very good. Idea 3, connecting material to other subjects is a waste of time.
You want this one?
This is definitely going in the basket. We want to make sure that there's as much connection as possible so that students really understand that everything is interrelated. And what we do in math is not just in math. It carries over to science, and we can use those skills and develop those skills across.
Well said. Well said. Look at you. It's the 3-pointer, you know.
That's good.
Number 4, today's world requires students to apply information in several areas.
Definitely.
Okay,
Everything's
5,
interdependent.
collaboration makes it hard to judge individual student growth.
You got some good ones.
There you go. Number 6, education must keep pace with applying new technologies.
Yes.
Yeah, in today's world, I mean, we use those things where they are and evaluate them.
Number 7, relating topics to real life motivates students to learn. You had a lot of good ones today. Okay, and including students in the decision-making process is an effective tool.
Yeah, student buy-in is a huge factor in a lot of things in running a great class and having them involved.
Well, I hope districts all across the country are listening and paying attention, because teaching for understanding is what we should be doing, focusing on real learning. So I want to thank Steve Beatty and Dr. Christine Miles for coming back today, and I hope you'll join me again, and I hope you'll join us on another episode of Brainstorm.
Why don't you ever see elephants hiding in trees? Because they're really good at it. Yeah, I get it.
Patriotism. It inspires passionate debate. It's worn like a badge of honor with good reason, because it means love and devotion for one's country. But what really makes up this country of ours? It's the people. To love America is to love all Americans. This year, patriotism shouldn't just be about pride of country. It should be about love. Love beyond age, sexuality, disability, race, religion, and other labels. Because love has no labels.
They call me Maxie, but I prefer tripod. I was your above-average four-legged homie, and then wham, bam, minivan. Some people pity me. Now that's lame. I still run, fetch, and swim. And the ladies love me. I'm the ultimate wingman. Just don't ask me to high five.
about the scarecrow who won an award? He was outstanding in his field.